All right, welcome back to Salt City Counseling, everybody. Once again, my name is Scott Carter. I'm a licensed therapist here in the beautiful state of Utah. It's Sunday, so here we are continuing my series on healing narcissistic trauma. So if you're new here and you're not sure whether or not you've been the recipient of narcissistic abuse, have narcissistic trauma, go check out my video on my cluster of signs indicators that someone has had narcissistic trauma or narcissistic abuse. In a nutshell, it's basically an identity around smallness or lack of identity, and always having that frantic mind. And in this video, I'm just going to continue this series on how to take this into your own hands, how to empower yourself, how to heal this. As a therapist, and I say this all the time, quite frankly, lately these days there's a lot of conventional therapy that I just don't think is helpful. I don't think is very effective. I don't think is very positive. I think a lot of trauma work that therapists typically do reinforces trauma. I think, and I say this all the time, I say this in almost every video. If you had like this wound on your leg, you wouldn't keep putting your finger in it. You wouldn't keep touching it. And be like, why isn't it healing? Why isn't it healing? Right? So the idea is instead is like properly care for it, dress it, love it, give it some ointment, give it new bandages, and leave it alone. Right? And so try to think of trauma is in a similar sense, like stop picking at it, like stop touching it. Like put a cone of shame. Think of the cone of shame. We all know this for our pets. We give them the cone of shame so that they won't bite and gnaw at their wounds and their stitches and stuff, their sutures. So try to think of put a cone of shame around your trauma, where it's like, don't stop picking at it. and so in this video, I'm going to share something that I share with most people, just in terms of like conceptualizing the self and why people continue to have this trauma plague them, even if the narcissist is gone out of their life, even if they're not dealing with this, even if they've ended the relationship and they've moved on. They've had greener pastures, but they still live in fear. They still apologize all the time. They still lack a sense of self. They still feel small, powerless, unworthy, and all of that, right? So I'm going to get into what I believe is a very, very important component to this. If you're following this series and you've got your notebook, time to bust that sucker out, man. Time to take some copious notes and write some stuff down for yourself and incorporate a lot of this stuff into your daily practices. Don't forget to meditate. Meditation is exorbitantly and important for this process. It's going to be very difficult to really make really positive progress without meditating. Okay, so before I get into this exercise today, is again, you got to write this stuff down. You got to do these exercises. I'm going to give you an exercise to do that you need to write down. Before I get into that, I'm going to get some housekeeping out of the way. If you're new here, help me out. Subscribe, share, comment, like, notification bell. You know what to do. If you want to ask a question, if you're a viewer and you have a viewer question, leave it in the comment section below, or you can send me an email, scottc@saltcitycounseling.com. Please make your question clear, or it will be ignored and discarded. I'm happy to answer questions. I really am. Very happy to answer questions, as long as they're clear and they make sense. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, sorry, bye. But if you really like my content, you can help me keep this going to you by hitting the tip jar, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. All those links are in the description below. If you've already sent me gratuity, thank you so much. Super appreciated. And so let's get into this, okay? So here's the thing. With people who have narcissistic trauma, I've talked about that frantic mind, right? Like a hamster wheel, just your overactive limbic system, your fight or flight. Most people that have had this type of trauma, they live at fight or flight. Now, fight or flight is a good response, but however, the fight or flight is only supposed to happen like in small, tiny windows throughout your life, short-lived windows. And unfortunately, a lot of people that have this type of trauma, that's where they live. That's their constant reality. And it gives them this tunnel vision. They have a hard time seeing out of it. And part of the nature of this, what keeps that limbic system overactive and that fight or flight response still engaged, is the perception that they're basically still feel like they are almost in a sense kind of hearing this person, arguing with this person, defending themselves from this person. It's almost like that narcissist there that's like they've left a little imp or something like on your shoulder to constantly say things in your ear like, why are you doing that? Why aren't you home yet? Why are you, why are you spending that money? Who are you with? I told you you couldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, a lot of people with this type of trauma, they find themselves still listening to that little voice on their shoulder, okay? And what's super important is, and this is the first thing I want you to write down, I don't have to listen to that voice. Okay? I don't have to listen to it. It's a choice. Okay? And just realizing that it's there. And realizing that it's almost as though you have this mean, nasty, controlling, psychotic person following you around and always berating you, always putting you down, always demanding that you defend yourself, that you explain yourself, always demanding that you tell me why you did that thing, right? And so if you're always listening to that voice and you're still mentally engaging it, your life is going to be miserable. You're going to be super duper unhappy. So the first step of this is learning to be mindful, which means basically noticing or having an awareness of when that voice is there and what precisely that it is saying. Okay? And if you write it down, you're actually going to start, if you start writing this stuff down, what it says to you, you're going to see it more objectively. You're going to start seeing it more so for what it actually is. Okay? So the first step is, what is this voice saying? Like, you could probably, like if I ask you right now, what is that voice telling you right now? Let's just stop, just for a couple seconds. What's it saying? Okay, maybe put a comment below. It's telling me this. And the more that you like write it down and bring awareness to it, maybe put it out there, the less power and control it's going to have on you. You're going to start realizing like, wait a second, this is dubious, right? And realizing that this particular voice, this thing on your shoulder, is the problem. Okay? You're not the problem, this is the problem. And what you have to do is remember, okay, I don't have to listen to it. I have a choice. Okay? I want you to write that down. I have a choice. I can choose to not listen to this. The more you listen to it, the more frantic you're going to be. Okay? So the first step here is to just notice that it's there and not engage with it. Now imagine that someone was sitting and talking to you and demanding things from you. And imagine picking up your phone and just completely ignoring them. And getting overly interested in something else. Like, oh, wow, a pen, right? And just realizing that, hey, they're uninteresting. They only have as much power as I give to them. Okay? So here's your exercise. Here's what I want you to do. There's several ways that we can do this. The more you do, the more effective it's going to be for you. Okay? I want you to write down. First, number one, okay? Get your notebook out. Number one, make a list of things throughout the day that this mean voice says to you. Okay? Just make a list. We're not judging it. We're not putting you down for listening to it or hearing it. We're not putting any labels or judgments or shoulds or supposed to's on this. We're just creating awareness around it. Just seeing it for what it is. That's the sole purpose of it. And maybe at the end of the day, you can sit down and say, today I noticed that mean voice. Give it a name. You can name it as this person, the narcissist in your life. You could give it that name. Today so-and-so said these things. Okay, so that's number one that I want you to do. Okay, number two, this voice, I want you to make a list of how this voice affects the following areas of my life. Okay, number one, how I feel about myself. Number two, work, career, job, success. Okay, number three, other relationships. Number four, my ability to have fun. There might be another area if you can think of it. Number five is my health, my personal health. and how well I take care of myself and my body. Okay, so make a list of how this voice affects, listening to this voice affects all those things. Okay, the third thing, again, the more you engage in all this, the more likely it is gonna have a positive impact on you. Okay, number 3 is I want you to start making a list. What would my life be like? What would those same areas that I just listed be like if I did not listen to that voice? Okay, now we're going to start creating a vision of the new self. Okay, or reinforcing that vision of the new self. I've had a lot of people do these exercises or do that type of exercise, and they come back and they're like, holy crap, I mean, that really gave me a lot of awareness. In one of my videos, I talked about using your prefrontal cortex. These are exercises where you're going to use the good part of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. Not that the other parts of your brain are bad necessarily, but this part of the brain needs to work more. This exercise is intended to engage this part of the brain. And when you do, you're going to start seeing things more so for how they are. You're going to have a greater sense of awareness. You're going to be like, whoa, I didn't realize. Now that I see this, right? And if you start looking at the situation more objectively from a distance, like, what if this was a friend of mine and I was watching them from the outside? How would I view it? What would it look like? Again, not intended to put any judgments or put any labels on it. All we're doing is just wanting to create some awareness around it. Okay, so go do those exercises. I would love to hear what people's experiences are with it. I would love to hear what people are noticing when they do these exercises. So please, maybe leave a comment below. Go do it, come back and let us know. Let people see what you're getting out of it. It can be very, very, very empowering. And it would be awesome to know that, you know, if people are having a positive experience with this or not. I do this type of stuff in therapy, and I generally find when people do this stuff in therapy, they get positive experiences out of it. So let us know. Okay, that's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next Sunday for our next installment of Healing Narcissistic Trauma. Good night, everyone.